So, you're looking to buy a story, aren't you? Well, looks like you're going to need yourself some narrative currency. So, what is that? How do you get it? How do you spend it? How do you make sure it was worth it? So, in order to understand narrative currency, we're going to start using some analogies. In this case, the stock market. Now, calm down, calm down. We're not using the actual stock market. We're just going to use the concept of the stock market. So, effectively speaking, the shorthand for this that you've probably heard before is setup and payoff. But we're going to be doing this from a much more mechanical perspective. Something that's easier to kind of write down as more of a numbers situation. So, in this regard, think of the things you've written down, the stories you're telling, as being their own individual little companies. You're building these up, you're fleshing them out, and as they grow, people invest in them. They are willing to spend money, they're willing to spend time reading them, and they care a great deal about them. So when you want that payoff, when you want it to come back to you, you're going to resolve that situation when it is most beneficial to you. So that'll end up being like selling off your stocks in that particular company. Now, keep in mind, you're in control of all of the companies on this stock market. So if you abandon a particular company and you just stop working with it, it's going to lose value. So, typically speaking, you don't want this to happen for the most part. Now, mind you, there's times when abandoning it is the entire point. So, as always, there's no hard and fast rules in writing. But if possible, you want to get your investment back by selling off your stocks, by having your payoff occur when it is valuable to you. And in this regard, it also encourages you to not just write a long side story that will provide you with no benefit. Just because you're spending a ton of time and a ton of investment on a thing, you're spending a lot of your narrative currency on a thing, doesn't mean it's going to have the same kind of return that something else will. So if you're having a drought, say, you don't want to be spending all of your money building a salt machine. You want to be spending it looking for water. So, with all of that set up out of the way, let's begin properly. So, I'm going to stick to some of my old stomping grounds known as Star Wars, and we're going to specifically go over Episode 4 and Ben Kenobi. So, starting off, when do we meet Ben? We meet him very early in the movie. He's one of the first characters we meet after Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. He saves Luke, and then you spend a significant portion of the movie with Ben teaching Luke, caring for him, instructing him, and then eventually dying before the climax of the movie, before Act 3 begins. So, in this regard, there is a lot of investment into the character of Ben Kenobi. He is with us for a significant amount of time, and he has a lot of things to do during that time. He isn't just kind of a background character. So, there's a lot of investment in Ben Kenobi, which means you want that investment to pay off. Now, ideally, you would also want that payoff to have some kind of rollover to continue to pay dividends even if you're no longer investing in the character. But first and foremost, you need that initial payout to be worth it. So, in order to understand why Ben dies when he does, we need to question what would happen had he stayed alive. And functionally speaking, Ben would have been on Yavin 4, standing around doing nothing, and then got on the mic and told Luke to use the Force. Now, without knowing that the Force can be used to speak from beyond the grave, if you just assume if he dies, he can't say that, narratively, you've lost almost nothing. Because all you've done is now either Luke hears it from someone else, like maybe Leia says use the Force or something, or he figures it out himself. You narratively lose very little from that line. Now, think of what you lose from Ben doing nothing. See, Ben just sitting around and doing nothing, you've put a lot of investment, a lot of time into him, but he's done nothing. He's given you nothing in return. So you've wasted a lot of your narrative currency on a character that isn't giving you a return. So you ideally want to start getting a return. You want that to happen the last time he's able to be invested in, which is the Death Star escape. And that's exactly what happens in the movie. In the movie, Ben splits off from the group. He goes over, he does what needs to be done for the group to escape, and then when it's time for them to leave, he confronts Darth Vader. And he dies. And this is an emotional moment. It's a very important part of the movie. And it gives you a lot of payoff because it establishes Darth Vader as a character. And that's what I'm talking about with that rollover. Ben dying to Darth Vader changes Act 3 of the movie. It changes the Death Star trench run. You see, had Darth Vader not killed Ben Kenobi, when he shows up at the end as a pilot, he's just some ace pilot in the Empire. With Ben running around, Darth Vader's just some guy we've seen stare menacingly for a little bit. And, oh no, the enemy's ace is here. It's sure it ain't a great time, but you don't have any real investment in this character as a bad guy. Now, take it with him having killed Ben. This is now the guy that killed Ben Kenobi. This is the guy that's killed this mentor, this very kind figure that's been with you for a significant portion of the movie. So while he may not have the full weight of what Ben used to have, he gets narrative rollover because he killed Ben Kenobi. So in this regard, you get the initial payoff from Ben dying, and you get dividends later in the movie when Vader comes back and is the guy that killed Ben. You get an additional return for an investment, which is very good to have. Now, let's flip this around. Let's do a bad example, and we're going to stick to Star Wars. We're going to go to Episode 8, and we're going to go to the Snoke theories. And so for everyone who doesn't remember, at the beginning of Episode 8, before anyone saw it, there was a ton of theories running around because the movie was supposedly going to reveal Snoke's origins. So everybody was wondering, who is Snoke? Because in Episode 7, all you saw was this guy who's acting like the Emperor, who's kind of gnarled and mangled, and he's really out of shape. But everyone had assumed there was no person of his power left in the galaxy on the side of the Sith. So Snoke showing up kind of throws things in disarray, and everybody wants to know who this guy is. So you have, outside of the movies, you have investment into a particular character and a particular resolution. And in the movies, what do you get? He goes out like a punk. I mean, he goes out like the most absolute punk person you've ever seen. The dude does not recognize that a saber is being pointed at him and just gets cut right in half. It is so ridiculous. Now, in and of itself, this one event isn't actually breaking for the movie. But this is endemic to the rest of the movie. And we'll get to that in a bit, but let's focus on this for now. So what you had was a character with a lot of investment into his one character, and then when he dies, you lose all potential future returns from that one character. And what did you get out of it? You didn't get anything really from Snoke. The investment was all in Kylo Ren, so the money spent, the narrative currency spent on Snoke would have been better spent on Kylo Ren. Snoke just being some kind of supposed bad guy works just as well as Snoke being some person that everyone invested in, narratively speaking. So you would have been better off spending your currency on Kylo Ren than you would have on Snoke. But the point of that move was to abandon the currency. This is where we get back to the rest of the movie. We know this because it was endemic for the entire movie. You had plot point after plot point get invested to, people looking at it like, oh, this is important, this is what we're going to do, yada, yada, yada. And just, you get no real payoffs. Just none. And you see it later when you see Finn charging the Death Star battering ram. Yes, I know that's not what it's called, but that's what I'm calling it. So you have Finn charging the Death Star battering ram, trying to make a heroic sacrifice to have a good end to his arc. His particular character has had a lot of investment in it, and this would be a good way for him to go out. Very important. He saved the rest of the resistance, and then boom, Rogue Stico stops him. Oh, you thought this guy was going to do something just because? Nah, just because we put all of this investment into this one thing, we're not going to give you any payoff. And this is endemic through the movie, as I said before. And what happens is you lose the correct value of what this does. See, yanking out the rug from your viewers, not paying off a particular scene, ends up being a lot like gambling. You see, gambling only works if you occasionally get something back. You've invested into this, but if you never get a return, people stop gambling. So when it comes to doing subversion of expectations, which is what that's called, if you never let your audience meet their expectations, if you never give them what they're looking for, they stop investing. It stops being a thing because they no longer play your game. And at the end of episode 8, that's what happened. Everyone was so busy understanding that nothing they invested in was meaningful, that it harmed episode 9. It harmed the rest of the franchise. Because now you're looking, you're like, well, can I trust them to actually meet anything they've said before? Like, you have Luke at the beginning. It's like, oh, Rey's going to be trained by Luke. He throws a saber over his back. You've now damaged the brand as a whole because you spent so much time telling people it isn't worth investing in my story. And when it comes to writing, you have to remember this is how you pay your bills. If people aren't willing to pay attention to your story, if they aren't willing to care about your story, they're not going to read it. They're going to take one look at your name on that book. They're going to be like, oh, not this guy again. I'm not going to read this book because it doesn't matter what I do. The author's going to stick his nose up, tell me I'm stupid for investing into this. So, in conclusion, narrative currency is the weight you put on an event or character. And generally speaking, you want to get a return on this investment. And ideally, you want this investment to roll into other investments. But sometimes it is beneficial to just yank it out and let it fall through, because it causes your audience to be on edge every time from then on. They invest more as a result, actually. But if you do it too much, they'll stop investing altogether. And, well, that's all I've got for you for today. Hope y'all have a good night.